For dull bread is bitter bread and sour. There's grief in the taste of it. There's weevils in the flour. So wrote Australian poet and playwright Dorothy Hewitt in her poem Where I Grew to Be a Man, based on the experiences of her friend Vera Deakin, who lived on Kooragang Island in the Hunter River at Newcastle. Newcastle was home to the steelworks of the Broken Hill Proprietary Company, which had been established in 1815 to mine silver and lead at Broken Hill in western New South Wales. When the 1930 to 1933 depression hit Australia, workers at the steel mills, like many others throughout all sectors of Australian industry, suffered severe hardship. But dull bread isn't the whole picture. This paper draws on interviews by Wendy Lowenstein in her 1978 book Weevils in the Flour, an oral record of the 1930s depression in Australia, and the Australian Woman's Mirror magazine during the depression years, to draw a fuller picture of what Australians ate during those years. First, a quick sketch of the depression as it affected Australia. Early in 1929, wrote historian Manning Clark, sharp falls in the prices of wool and wheat, the withdrawal of English capital, and the foreign export prices by 50% began a severe financial crisis. On October 29, 1929, the US stock market crashed, precipitating the worldwide financial crisis now called the Great Depression, which was to last globally till 1933. Australia's national income fell from £640 million to £560 million between 1928-29 and 1929-30. Unemployment increased sharply. In response, the Commonwealth Labour government appointed Sir Otto Niemeyer of the Bank of England to draw up a plan for shoring up Australia's finances. As Niemeyer saw it, wrote Manning Clark, the Australian policy of protection of native industry, a key platform of all Australian governments since Federation, and heavy borrowing abroad had created a standard of living that bore little relation to the Australian level of production. Niemeyer recommended further cuts to government infrastructure projects, wages, social welfare and defence spending. The Commonwealth and states agreed to the plan. The result was catastrophic. By 1932, unemployment reached a peak of 32%. An estimated 40,000 people were made homeless, many living in shanty towns or public parks. Upwards of 30,000 men went on the wallaby, wandering through rural Australia looking for work. As the stock market was crashing on October 29, Australian newsagents were stocking their magazine rack with that week's issue of the Australian Woman's Mirror. First published in October 1924 as a spin-off from the Bulletin magazine, the Mirror aimed to appeal to Australian women. Every female interest and activity will be served in the best way that long experience can suggest and money can command. By 1929, 160,000 copies sold each week at threepence per copy. It carried a regular feature, Kitchen Craft, whose author unfortunately was never identified, and also carried recipes submitted by readers. Women also contributed short articles about aspects of managing their household on other pages in the magazine. But now it was 2 months from Christmas 1929, and the topic of Kitchen Craft was getting ready for Christmas, with recipes for rich Christmas cake, rich Christmas pudding, mincemeat pies. Reader SCS of Rosebery contributed My Grandmother's Christmas Pudding. Hazelbrook of Cremorne gave her recipe for currant peel and cherry Christmas cake, and Ruth of Turramurra contributed her Christmas plum pudding. The Mirror usually only published the initials of contributors, or sometimes a pen name, and the initials of the state where they lived. A week later, the Mirror of 5th November gave no hint anywhere in the magazine that anything of any consequence had happened. Kitchen Craft featured toothsome savouries, 3 types of scones, geranium jelly, roast pork with apple and date stuffing, pork cheese made with pig's trotters, and readers contributed fish soufflé, cheese fritters, tripe delicious, carrot cup pudding, and frosted ginger cake. The first hint that something was changing comes in the edition of 3rd December 1929, in which Agnes Robinson assures readers that while they might stifle a sigh as we realise the cost of a ham for Christmas, when it is remembered that there is little waste, the bone will later provide excellent soup, and the ham keeps well, it will be found that it is, after all, not a very expensive luxury. However, by April 1930, it is clear that financial hardship is becoming more common. Pa of South Australia contributes 2 nourishing economy dishes to the edition of 14th April. Sheep's head and fry, in which the head, liver and heart are boiled, the head then covered in egged breadcrumbs and browned in the oven and served with the minced heart and liver, and rabbit with vegetables. Dishes of offal were common at that time, and later editions of the Mirror would continue to carry recipes for it. Gwenda, writing in May 1931, commenting on a thrifty meals competition held by the Victorian Housewives Association, was pleased to see the extent to which housewives have used sheep's head to make economical and nourishing dishes. Rabbits also were standard fare, if the Mirror is any gauge of its popularity, with the recipe for rabbit appearing on average in every second edition, peaking in June 1933 with a kitchen craft feature on further suggestions for rabbit dinners, which included rice and rabbit stew, rabbit cream, rabbit brawn, rabbit paste, rabbit and potato rissoles, cheese and rabbit dish, roast rabbit with apple raisin stuffing, fried rabbit with tartare sauce, queen soup, which involved boiling rabbit in a stock and then rubbing it through a sieve, and corned rabbit, all recipes contributed by readers. It wasn't only the cost-conscious home cook for whom rabbits were a blessing. Tom Hills, speaking with Lois Sting, recalled the food of workers on government relief work in rural Australia, a national scheme under which men could earn a small sum for labouring on public works, the catch being that they had to keep moving from place to place to get the income. Our food stuff, Tom Hills said, used to come out after midnight. We didn't have meat for 3 months because we couldn't keep it. Our meat supply was rabbits. They were like flocks of sheep. You'd put a trap down, catch a rabbit, skin it, cook it, chuck what was left away. Next meal, go down, catch a rabbit, skin it, cook it, chuck it away. Tom Galvin, who lived in the self-deprecatingly named Happy Valley unemployed people's camp at La Perouse in Sydney, told Lowenstein, "It seems we were often hungry, but not absolutely without resource. Many homes had gardens where vegetables could be grown, where chooks could be kept, and there was always the rabbit." Galvin also recalled that local fishermen would give us a handout, especially when they got salmon, because their chance of selling it at the market were next to nil, get tuppence a pound for it. We might help pull in the nets. The Chinese market gardens up the road could only sell their top production, and their cheapest grades they gave to us. The Dairy Farmers Cooperative donated 16 gallons of milk a day to the camp. Kangaroos and wallaby, by the way, get just 1 recipe each over the course of the depression issues of the Mirror. As 1930 progressed, the Mirror carried more material on feeding a family in straitened times. In the 6th May issue, Kitchen Craft featured economy dishes for hard times, which it said were enough to keep house for 3 people on less than £2 per week. Instead of the expensive cutlets prepared by the butcher, purchase £1 or £1.5 of the best end of neck mutton. Ask the butcher to divide between the joints so that the chops can be separated singly. Trim each chop as tradesmen do cutlets and flatten it with your kitchen chopper. If you have not a chopper, a small wood hatchet answers the purpose. If your hens are laying, the cutlets may be dipped in egg and crumbs and fried in the usual way. If the hens are molting and have ceased laying, or if you do not possess hens, you need not buy eggs. Use instead a batter made with a little flour and water, salted and peppered and coloured with a pinch of flavoured custard powder. A little chopped parsley may be added to the batter. Serve with mashed potato, or boil 3 onions and 1 pound of potatoes together. Save the water they are boiled in for soup. Rub the potatoes and onions through a sieve, place in a clean saucepan with a little butter and a tablespoonful of warmed milk. Beat till light, pile on a hot dish and place the cutlets grilled round it. Simmer the trimmings of the meat and bones and add the onion and potato water. This with a suitable seasoning of pepper, salt, a little tomato pulp or anything else suitable that you may have, a little blended flour or corn flour for thickening, will make a soup for the same day's dinner or for the next day at less than the cost of the cutlets alone had the butcher trimmed them for you. In the May 27 issue, MBD of New South Wales, while commending the advice from Kitchen Craft earlier in May, draws attention to what she considers an important, untouched vital point in kitchen economy, the question of making the most of food by using up the scraps. She offers this three-course meal. Bread soup, which she says is very popular in France, and which can be made with stale bread, stock made from vegetable peelings, scraps of bacon and cold meat. Potato puffs, bowls of minced cold cuts of meat and mashed potato, flavoured with Worcestershire sauce, rolled in egg and breadcrumbs and deep fried, and cake crumb pudding, made much like bread pudding. The meal, in the quantities she gives, she writes, is sufficient for 3 persons and will cost about 1 and 3pence, except where eggs and milk are homegrown. As unemployment continued to grow alarmingly, state governments put in place relief measures. Whilst they varied from place to place, wrote Lowenstein, they were alike in their niggardly insufficiency. Victoria was the only state to make cash payments to the unemployed. Mary E. from Victoria contributed Living on the Ration to the 4th August 1931 edition of the Mirror. I manage on a Victorian sustenance order, she wrote, under which we are allowed 7 and 2pence worth a week of groceries, 4 shillings worth of meat, 5 large loaves of bread every second day, and a quart of milk a day. My husband, she continues, is an unemployed clerk, but does canvassing every day from 9 to 5 to make the rent. He doesn't always manage it. And to give me 1 6 a week for vegetables and fruit. My meat, she says, is a simple matter, as I have a very kind and generous butcher, and my children do not need a lot of meat. The eldest is not quite 7, 2 others are 5 and a bit and 4, and the last 2 girls, respectively 2 years and 7 months. I have been able to feed the baby, but will not be able to do that much longer. I take this to mean that she's still breastfeeding. I was hard put to it at first to know what to get with my 7 and 2pence for groceries, she continues. But this is how I now lay out the sum. 3 pounds sugar, 1 and 1.5 pence. 1 packet self-raising flour, 4pence. Half a pound mild cheese, 5pence. Half a pound loose cocoa, 3.5 pence. 8 pounds potatoes, 3pence. 1 pound butter, 1 and 7. Half a dozen eggs, 1 shilling. 1 pint kerosene, 3pence. 2 pounds digestive meal, 2.5 pence. 1 pound rice or barley, 3pence. 1 small bar velvet soap, 4pence. 1 tin jam, 6pence. 1 tin syrup, 6.5 pence. Perhaps 2 boxes of matches or a knot of blue with the remainder, 1 pen. The syrup here is golden syrup, and the knot of blue is the laundry product added when washing white clothes, usually a small amount of blue dye that makes whites look whiter. Not being a tea drinker, she writes, a half pound lasts us quite a long time. Syrup also lasts almost a fortnight, so I alternate between syrup and jam. If one got sauces, mustard, etc., the 7 and 2pence would not be enough. I could do with more, but I manage. Digestive meal is very cheap, and with half milk and half water and some flavouring, makes a nice blancmange with stewed fruit. I vary with oatmeal for breakfast some weeks to prevent the kiddies getting tired of it. The butter lasts till Tuesday, and the rest of the time we use dripping. But dripping can be made quite tasty if a little thought is used. The eggs are used for baking, and sandwiches for school lunches. Rice and barley make nice puddings, and to save fuel, I usually put on a pudding or stew fruit while the breakfast is cooking. Even if a stew or soup cooks for only half an hour, it means the fire needs to be stoked for at least that much less time. While Mary was apparently still using a wood stove, gas stoves were increasingly popular. Kitchencraft, in the same edition, had suggestions for how to make the most of a gas stove. A clean gas stove will use less gas and give better results than a neglected one. Learn to regulate the flame. Unless you have it at the correct length and color, you will consume twice as much gas as is necessary. The flame should be 3/4 of an inch to 1 inch long, sharp and distinct, blue in color. The best ware to use is aluminium, as anything thick and heavy will take more gas. Asbestos mats will obviate burning. Readers also contributed suggestions for savings on gas. ETG of New South Wales advised in July 1931, there is no need to light a gas oven merely to cook a custard pudding. Rice, sago, etc. may be put in a pie dish with sufficient milk and sugar, placed over a low burner and cooked gently till soft. Then remove from the stove, cool slightly and add beaten eggs and flavourings. Place the pie dish in a larger one, partly filled with hot water. Cover with either another pie dish or an enamel plate and cook over low gas. When boiling vegetables, she suggests, place a kettle of water at top of the pot instead of using the lid. The water will be almost boiling by the time the vegetables are cooked. Daisy of South Australia writes in the following July issue that she uses a gas saver called a meter beater, which I bought for a very small sum. It is made of cast iron and shaped to take 3 saucepans. Stand it over a gas jet and 3 pans can be kept boiling with a very small flame once the apparatus is hot. Unlike the Victorian government, the New South Wales government opted for relief first through providing food directly. Ina, speaking to Wendy Lowenstein, recalled, at first, when unemployment got bad, they didn't give coupons. You all had to go to number 7 Wharf, didn't matter where you lived. You took a sugar bag and you lined up. There'd be thousands of you, and you'd get a ticket. You'd have to take that up to the Benevolent Society rooms in Key Street, up near Central Station. It's about 2 miles from the wharf, so you had to walk up. Depending on the size of your family, you'd get the food handed out to you. A tin of plum jam, a tin of condensed milk, a tin of syrup, 3 or 4 loaves of bread, and a big hunk of meat cut just anyway. That had to feed you and your family. There was no cheese, or butter, or eggs, nothing nourishing, no vegetables. It would take all day. In mid-1932, things had improved. Edith Butler, a nurse who would later become nurse matron to the Australian Army, writing in the Mirror in May 1932, noted, as a result of so many persons being on the dole and its carefully arranged ration, there has been a noticeable improvement in health, particularly in children. This improvement is said to be due to the fact that the ration is scientifically compiled and the housewife have much less to spend on luxury and unsuitable foods, those consumed being of a higher nutritive value. It is assumed that those using the ration are unemployed, so the ration is based on sufficient food to keep healthy those at moderate work, meaning, I think, the relief work Tom Hill spoke of. A typical ration is that allowed an average family of father, mother and 2 children. Such a ration provides for this weekly supply. 9 loaves or 18 pounds of bread, 8 pounds of meat, 10 ounces of tea, 4 pounds sugar, 48 ounces of jam, 3 pounds condensed milk, 1 3/4 pounds butter, 3/4 of a pound cheese, 7 pounds potatoes, 2 pounds onions, 1 pound prunes, 2 pounds oatmeal, 2 pounds golden syrup, 1 pound rice, 3 pounds flour, 7 pints milk. An alternative list says house mothers have the option to substitute any of the following items for one another, and also to take instead of the foregoing any of these commodities: powdered milk, dripping, honey, barley, cocoa, coffee, eggs, salt, baking powder, treacle, pumpkins, swedes, self-raising flour, dried peas or lentils, currants, sultanas and raisins. Butler was critical of the ration, saying it lacked sufficient mineral salts and vitamins to keep the body healthy, and the mineral salts in balance had to enable the food to be made use of properly by assimilation. She advocates increasing the intake of greater draw vegetables, pumpkin, turnip, swedes and carrots in particular. Liver, she writes, is cheap and it should be selected a couple of times a week. And when, as in the country, buttermilk is available, it should be taken. Meat need not be the best cut to provide good value, for scrag at 3 per pound has as much good food value as ribs of beef and makes a delicious stew with carrots, turnips, parsley and barley added. And corned beef at 2.5 pence per pound is economical food and can be eaten hot one day with vegetables cooked with it, thereby saving gas, and cold the next day with a raw vegetable salad. Roughage, he writes, is essential for proper elimination each day. So where fruit and vegetables are limited, it is important to see that coarser foods are eaten. Bran, prunes, raisin and barley supply roughage. Ration 4.2 from New South Wales in June 1932 writes that she found Butler's article very helpful and interesting, but the statutory ration for two takes some managing. She describes the monthly system she has developed that she says works very well. I have for foundation 3 good-sized pumpkins in store, some salt, pepper, herbs, but as I have now no money, I searched the bush for fresh dandelion leaves, fat hen and sorrel. The first and third weeks of the month, I have just the dole ration. I find it goes farther, alternative substitutes working out too costly. On the second and fourth weeks, I substitute a 2-pound tin of treacle for the jam and 2 ounces of the tea, an extra quarter pound of butter and a box of matches or a knot of blue for the prunes, and 2 loaves of wholemeal bread and 2 pounds of self-raising flour instead of the 4 loaves. Some may think less butter necessary, but my experience is that with green vegetables limited, one is liable to suffer constipation. So the week we have no prunes, we have the extra butter. With various soups and different cuts of meat with dripping and suet alternately, I feel I manage meals as nourishing as possible with the least sameness and hope for the best, but the sight of a dish of new laid eggs or a slice of juicy ham would set my mouth watering for a week. The fat hen that Ration 4.2 mentions is also known as lamb's quarters, goosefoot and pigweed. It's in the same family as spinach and quinoa, to which it is closely related. Readers wrote of other ways to economise. Diez Faustus of New South Wales wrote in the same issue as did Ration 4.2 that the making of savoury paste is one of the best ways of using up leftovers, and gave recipes for corned beef and sausage paste, curried rabbit paste, yes, rabbit again, and economical anchovy paste which adds anchovy essence to mashed potatoes. La Folle in May 1933 writes that the biggest saving in my household budget this year has been made by buying fruits in case lots from the grower. Many fruit growers now advertise a freight paid to your railway station price per case of fruit, often with a reduction for 2 or more cases. In my experience, this works out at a price per pound from half to 1/3 that charged by retail shops. The average consumption in my family is half a case a week. I have a bottling outfit and preserve any surplus. SPES in February 1933 writes about a cooperative buying group of which she is part. We have a little circle of women in our town who club together to buy many essential lines, and this saves us considerably. Bacon they buy by the side and take turns with the different cuts. Potatoes are bought by the bag and dried fruits by the box. Household grocery lines that all need are bought by the dozen. The cooperators buy their eggs by the case in spring at market wholesale rates and so save the threepence charged by retailers. They preserve eggs themselves. It is just a matter of getting a few kindred saving souls to club together. This was the last issue of the Australian Woman's Mirror during the Depression years to carry an article about food that referenced economic hardship. By 1939, unemployment had fallen considerably, but many families remained on the dole. Australia was about to enter the Second World War, when a new round of rationing would begin.